private jet touched down just after sunrise. Ethan Mercer looked out through the oval window as the Dallas skyline emerged through the morning haze. 3 days earlier, he had finalized the deal that transformed his artificial intelligence company into a billion-dollar enterprise. Reporters wanted interviews, investors wanted meetings, industry magazines wanted him on their covers. None of that mattered this morning. For the first time in years, he was finally coming home, and the first thing he planned to do was pick up his father. What Ethan did not know was that within a few hours, he would walk into a nursing home and find the man who had sacrificed everything for him sitting alone in a corner, forgotten by almost everyone who claimed to care about him. It was the kind of shocking reveal that changed a life forever. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 3 weeks before the plane landed, Ethan still believed his father was living comfortably in the family home. The assumption felt reasonable. After all, he had spent years making sure Harold Mercer never had to worry about money again. As Ethan stepped off the jet, his phone buzzed with messages from executives and journalists. He ignored all of them. Instead, he opened a photo. It was an old picture of Harold standing in front of the small brick house where Ethan had grown up. His father looked strong, solid, the kind of man who could repair anything with a toolbox and enough patience. Ethan smiled. Just a few more hours, he thought. By late morning, he was driving through familiar streets. The neighborhood looked older than he remembered. Some storefronts had changed. A few houses had fresh paint. Others looked tired. But when he turned onto his father's street, something immediately felt wrong. He slowed the car, then stopped. The house was gone. Not physically, the building was still there, but it no longer belonged to Harold. A large real estate sign stood near the driveway. Sold. Ethan stared at it. For several long seconds, he simply sat behind the wheel. Maybe there was some mistake. Maybe Harold had moved temporarily. Maybe a woman watering flowers across the street noticed him. She hesitated, then walked over. "Ethan?" she asked carefully. He recognized her after a moment. Mrs. Dawson, a long-time neighbor. "Good to see you," Ethan said. "I'm looking for my dad." The expression on her face changed instantly. The smile disappeared. Concern replaced it. "You didn't know?" she asked quietly. A cold feeling moved through Ethan's chest. "Know what?" Mrs. Dawson lowered the watering hose. "Your father hasn't lived here for a long time." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. "What do you mean?" "He moved into a nursing home almost 2 years ago." Ethan blinked. A nursing home? The words made no sense. His father wasn't wealthy, but he wasn't poor. Ethan had sent money regularly. More than enough money. Far more than enough. "Which nursing home?" he asked. An hour later, Ethan pulled into the parking lot of a facility on the edge of the city. The building looked tired. The paint was fading. Several windows needed repair. The sign out front leaned slightly to one side. This was not where Harold Mercer should have been living. Inside, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet. A receptionist directed him toward the dining room. His footsteps slowed as he approached. Something deep inside him already knew he wasn't going to like what he found. The room was quiet. Several elderly residents sat eating lunch. Some watched television. Others stared out the windows. And then Ethan saw him. Harold Mercer sat alone at a small table in the far corner. No visitors, no conversation, no company. Just a tray of untouched food. For a moment, Ethan couldn't move. The man in front of him barely resembled the father he remembered. Harold looked thinner, older. His shoulders curved forward slightly. His hair had become almost completely gray. The strongest man Ethan had ever known suddenly looked fragile. A staff member approached quietly. "Are you family?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "I'm his son." The woman seemed surprised. Then something like sadness crossed her face. Oh, just one word, but Ethan felt it. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. The woman hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Your father doesn't get many visitors. How many?" She looked toward Harold. "None." Ethan stared at her. "None?" She shook her head. "Not for almost 2 years." The words hit harder than any business failure ever could. Almost 2 years. 2 years of birthdays. 2 years of holidays. 2 years of sitting alone in this place. And somehow Ethan had never known. The hidden truth sat in front of him like a physical object. His father had not been abandoned by poverty, he had been abandoned by people. Ethan walked slowly across the room. When he reached the table, Harold finally looked up. Their eyes met. For one brief second, emotion flashed across the older man's face. Shock, disbelief, something dangerously close to hope. Then it vanished. Harold looked away. His expression hardened. Ethan pulled out the empty chair. "Dad." The word came out almost as a whisper. Harold stared at the table for several seconds. Then he finally spoke. His voice sounded tired, far older than Ethan remembered. "What are you doing here?" Ethan frowned. "I came to take you home." Harold's face changed instantly. Not relief, not happiness, fear, real fear. He looked around the room before leaning forward slightly. Then he asked a question that made Ethan's blood run cold. "What are you doing here?" Harold repeated. "They aren't going to like this." Ethan did not answer right away. He only stared at his father, trying to understand how a man could look so small in a room full of people. Harold Mercer had once filled doorways. He had once carried toolboxes up 3 flights of stairs without stopping. He had once worked 12-hour days and still come home with enough strength to fix a leaking faucet, change a tire, or sit at the kitchen table and listen to Ethan talk about impossible dreams. Now he sat with one hand wrapped around a plastic cup of water, looking over his shoulder like someone had trained him to be afraid of being seen. "Who won't like this?" Ethan asked. Harold's mouth tightened. He glanced toward the hallway, then down at the tray in front of him. The food had gone cold. A pale scoop of mashed potatoes, a square of meatloaf, green beans that looked tired under the fluorescent lights. "Dad," Ethan said, lowering his voice, "talk to me." Harold shook his head once, not angry, not even stubborn, afraid. "You shouldn't have come here without calling," he said. "I did call." Harold looked up then. Ethan felt the first crack of something open inside him. "I called you for months," Ethan continued. "Your phone went straight to voicemail. Olivia said you didn't like talking much anymore. She said you got tired easily." At the sound of Olivia's name, Harold's face closed. Not fully, but enough. It was like watching a door quietly shut from the inside. Ethan saw it. He saw the small tightening around his father's eyes, the way his fingers moved on the cup, the way his shoulders pulled in almost as if the room had suddenly become colder. "Olivia has helped a lot," Harold said. The words sounded practiced. They hurt because Ethan could hear that they were not the whole truth. "She told me you were still in the house," Ethan said. "She told me you had a home aide coming twice a week. She told me you were comfortable." Harold looked away. The silence was answer enough. A nurse passed by with a cart of folded towels. She glanced at them, then quickly looked away, as if she had seen this kind of reunion before and knew better than to step into it. Ethan pulled the chair closer and sat down. His expensive coat brushed against the edge of the table. It looked wrong here. Everything about him looked wrong here. The watch, the shoes, the quiet confidence that usually made people step aside when he entered a room. None of it mattered in front of his father. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan asked. Harold gave a small, dry laugh. It had no humor in it. "And say what? That your old man couldn't manage his own life anymore? That's not what this is. You don't know what this is. Then tell me." Harold's eyes moved to him again. They were still sharp beneath the exhaustion. That was what nearly broke Ethan. His father was still there, buried under fear, under shame, under years of being handled by other people. "But still there. You were busy," Harold said quietly. Ethan swallowed. "I would have come." Harold looked at him for a long second. Then he looked down again. The sentence between them was the one neither of them said. "But you didn't." Ethan felt it land in his chest with a weight he was not ready for. He had built companies, closed deals, crossed oceans, sat across from people who measured power in billions. But he had not sat across from his father in nearly 4 years. There had always been a reason, a launch, a merger, a board crisis, a flight cancelled, a promise to come next quarter, and every month the money went out, clean, automatic, enough to quiet the guilt for another 30 days. The truth was beginning to form, and he hated its shape. He had thought money was care. Maybe it was only the receipt for care he had not given. A woman in a grey cardigan stepped into the dining room and paused when she saw Ethan sitting with Harold. She looked to be in her late 50s, with tired eyes and the practiced calm of someone who had spent years working around pain. Her name tag read Marlene Mr. Mercer, she said gently. "Everything all right?" Harold did not answer. Ethan stood. I'm Ethan Mercer, his son. Marlene held his gaze for a moment. Something passed across her face. Not surprise this time. More like confirmation. I thought so, she said. You know me? Only from his emergency contact page. Ethan frowned. His emergency contact page should have listed him first. Marlene seemed to sense the question before he asked it. Would you like to speak in the office? Harold's hand moved quickly. He caught Ethan's wrist. The grip was weaker than Ethan remembered. That made it worse. Don't, Harold said. Dad, leave it alone. Ethan looked down at his father's hand, the same hand that had once held a wrench, carried groceries, steadied ladders, signed permission slips, fixed broken things before anyone else even noticed they were broken. Now it trembled against the sleeve of Ethan's coat. I can't leave this alone, Ethan said softly. Harold's eyes filled, but he blinked hard before tears could form. You don't understand, he whispered. Family can do a lot of damage when they think they're owed something. Ethan went still. Marlene looked away, giving them the mercy of not reacting. What does that mean? Ethan asked. Harold released his wrist. His hand dropped back to the table. It means you should talk to Olivia before you make this worse. Worse than what? Harold did not answer. Ethan waited. Nothing. The old silence returned, not peaceful silence, not thoughtful silence. A silence built by years of being warned, corrected, managed, and made to feel like every need was too much. Ethan turned to Marlene. I want to seize his Harold closed his eyes. Please, he said. It was not a command. It was almost a plea. Ethan looked back at him, and the anger in his chest shifted into something deeper, more painful. His father was not protecting himself. He was protecting someone else. Maybe Olivia. Maybe Ethan. Maybe the last fragile piece of family he thought he still had. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, Ethan said. Harold opened his eyes. That's what people always say before the truth starts hurting everybody. Marlene cleared her throat softly. I can only release certain documents with authorization, she said. But your father can approve what he wants shared. Harold stared at the tray. Ethan did not push, not yet. Instead, he sat back down. He picked up the fork, cut a small piece of meatloaf, and set it near Harold's hand. Eat a little, Ethan said. Harold looked at the fork, then at Ethan. For a second, the fear faded. In its place came something older, something that looked almost like grief. You sound like your mother, Harold said. Ethan's throat tightened. He had not expected that. His mother had been gone for many years, and no one mentioned her casually anymore. Her name lived in old photos, in a few boxes Ethan had never had the courage to move, in the corners of conversations where both men always stopped before it hurt too much. She would hate this, Ethan said. Harold nodded slowly. Yes, he said, she would. That was the first honest thing he had said. Ethan stayed with him through lunch. Harold ate 3 bites, then 4. Not because he was hungry, Ethan suspected, but because his son was watching, and some habits of love survived even fear. When the tray was taken away, Marlene returned. She carried a thin folder pressed against her chest. Mr. Mercer, she said to Harold, your son has asked about your admission paperwork. I know this is uncomfortable, but he is listed as family. And there are billing summaries he has a right to request if he provides identification. Harold's face tightened again. Ethan stood. Billing summaries? Marlene hesitated. Yes. Ethan pulled out his wallet and handed her his ID. Harold looked at the folder like it was something alive. Ethan, he said quietly, but Ethan kept his eyes on Marlene. She opened the folder and removed several copied pages. She did not hand over everything, just enough. Ethan could tell she was being careful, walking the line between policy and conscience. These are the monthly care invoices, she said. The account contact is listed here. Ethan took the papers. His eyes moved down the page. Facility name, room number, billing rate, payment status, responsible party. For a moment his mind refused to process what he saw. The responsible party was not Harold Mercer. It was not Ethan Mercer. It was Olivia Grant. And beside her name was a mailing address Ethan recognized. The office address where he had been sending his father's money for years. Ethan did not drive back to his hotel right away. He sat in the nursing home parking lot, with the invoice papers spread across the passenger seat, staring at Olivia's name until the letters stopped looking like a name and started looking like a wound. Olivia Grant, his cousin, the woman who had sent him cheerful updates about Harold's blood pressure, his groceries, his roof repair, his home aid, his comfort. The woman who had told him the house was fine. the woman who had thanked him every month when the transfers cleared and said, "Don't worry, Ethan, I've got him." And Ethan had believed her. Not because he was foolish, because he had wanted to believe there was still someone back home standing close enough to his father to notice when he needed something. He opened his banking app. The numbers loaded slowly, one month after another. 5,000, 7,000, 10,000 for repairs, 3,000 for medication. 12,000 the winter. Olivia said the heating system had failed. Smaller transfers too, regular ones. Enough to cover utilities, groceries, taxes, care, comfort, whatever Harold needed. The money had gone out cleanly, automatically, faithfully. Ethan scrolled back 2 years, then 3, then 4. His face grew colder with every line. The total was not small. It was the kind of number that should have kept a man safe. Not wealthy, not extravagant, but safe. Warm house, good food, proper medical care, someone to help when walking became harder, someone to drive him to appointments, someone to sit with him when the rooms got too quiet. Not this, not a corner table in a low-cost nursing home with cold meatloaf and no visitors. Ethan called Olivia before he could talk himself out of it. She answered on the 4th ring. "Ethan?" Her voice was bright, surprised, controlled. "You're calling from a US number. Are you in Dallas?" "I'm here." A short silence, only a second, but Ethan heard it. "Well," she said, recovering quickly, "that would have been nice to know. I could have picked you up from the airport. I went to the house." The brightness faded. "What house?" "My father's house." Olivia breathed in softly. "Ethan, one word is not going to be enough. I can explain." "Good," he said. "Start with why it was sold." Another pause, longer this time. When Olivia spoke again, her voice had changed. It was still calm, but there was a careful weight in it now, the kind people used when they were trying to sound reasonable before they had even been accused. "Your father made that decision." "My father sold the house?" "Yes, without telling me. He didn't want you upset." Ethan looked through the windshield at the nursing home. An elderly man sat near a window inside, his head tilted toward the glass as if he were watching for someone who never came. "That's convenient," Ethan said. "It wasn't convenient," Olivia replied, a little sharper. "It was painful, for all of us. But Harold was declining. The house was too much. The stairs, the repairs, the property taxes, the utilities. He needed care. I sent money for all of that." "You sent money," she said, and now there was something bitter under the words. "Yes, from Europe, from boardrooms. From wherever your next important meeting happened to be." Ethan went still. Olivia caught herself. He could almost hear her stepping back from the edge. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "That came out wrong. I just mean it was complicated on the ground. Complicated enough to put him in a nursing home and not tell me. He agreed to it. He looked afraid when I asked questions. "That's not fair." "No," Ethan said quietly. "None of this is fair." He heard movement on her end. A drawer closing, maybe a door. Olivia was probably in her office, the one with glass walls and pale furniture and framed certificates that made everything she did look official. "I handled what had to be handled," she said. "You were not here, Ethan. That's the part you keep skipping." The words hit because there was truth inside them. Not the whole truth, but enough to hurt. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. He saw Harold's hand trembling around that plastic cup. He saw the fear on his face. He saw the invoice with Olivia's name printed neatly where his own should have been. "I want to see the sale documents," he said. "You don't need to do that." "I do." "Ethan, listen to me. Your father signed those papers, then send them. I'm not comfortable sharing private legal documents over the phone. Then I'll come get them." Silence. This time, Olivia did not answer quickly. "That sounds dramatic," she said at last. "It sounds necessary. You land after years away, walk into one facility, see one emotional moment, and suddenly you think everyone who stayed behind is a villain." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I didn't call you a villain, no, but you're building toward it." He looked down at the papers again, her name, her address, her control. "Send me the documents, Olivia. I'll have to look for them. You're a financial consultant. You don't lose property records." Her voice cooled. "I said I'll look." The call ended before Ethan could answer. For a few seconds he sat there with the phone still against his ear, listening to nothing. Then he lowered it slowly. The old Ethan, the one who ran meetings and negotiated contracts, understood something immediately. Olivia was not confused. She was buying time. That afternoon Ethan went to the county records office. He did not send an assistant. He did not call a lawyer yet. He wanted to see the truth with his own eyes. The clerk at the records counter was a woman named Paula, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and reading glasses hanging from a chain. She asked for the address and typed quietly for several minutes. There was a sale, she said. When? 14 months ago. Ethan felt the number settle. 14 months. His father had been in the nursing home almost 2 years. The house had been sold after that. Buyer? Paula's turned the screen slightly away, following protocol, then printed the public record and slid it across the counter. Ethan looked at the page. The house had sold below market value, much below. His fingers tightened around the paper. Is there a deed transfer document? He asked. There is. She printed that too. This page took longer. When she handed it over, Ethan saw Harold's name. Then the signature at the bottom, Harold Mercer. It looked like his father's signature. Mostly. But something about it was wrong. Too shaky, too uneven. Too unlike the man who had once signed birthday cards, checks, repair forms, tax documents, everything with a firm, straight hand. Beside the signature was another name, witnessed by Olivia Grant. Ethan stared at it for a long time. He took pictures of every page, paid for certified copies, and walked back to his car with the papers under his arm like they weighed more than paper should. By the time he returned to the nursing home, the afternoon light had gone soft and yellow through the windows. Harold was in his room now. The room was small but clean. A narrow bed, a dresser, a framed landscape print on the wall that looked like it had been bought in bulk. On the dresser sat a plastic comb, a bottle of lotion, and a stack of folded socks. No family photos. That hurt more than Ethan expected. Harold looked up when Ethan entered. You came back, he said. Of course I came back. Harold looked at the folder in Ethan's hand. His face changed. Ethan sat in the chair beside the bed and placed the papers on his lap. I found the sale record. Harold closed his eyes. Dad. I signed it, Harold said. Ethan waited. Harold opened his eyes again. They were wet now, though no tears had fallen. I signed it, he repeated. That's what the paper says. That's what everyone will say. Did you want to sell the house? The room went quiet. Out in the hall, someone laughed softly at a television. A cart rolled past. Somewhere a phone rang twice and stopped. Harold looked toward the window. That house had your mother in it, he said. Every room, every mark on the wall, every cabinet handle she picked. I would have died there if they'd let me. Ethan's throat tightened. Then why? Harold's hand moved across the blanket, slow and restless. Because by then, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I thought I didn't have any choice. Ethan leaned forward. What does that mean? Harold looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time since Ethan had found him, the fear in his father's face broke open enough to show the shame underneath. It means Olivia had papers, Harold said, and doctors and signatures, and she kept saying it was temporary. Ethan felt the room tilt slightly. What papers? Harold looked away. The ones that said she could decide things for me. Ethan did not sleep that night. He sat at the small desk in his hotel room with the nursing home invoices, the deed transfer records, and his own bank statements spread out in front of him. The room was quiet, too clean, too still. The city lights outside the window blurred against the glass, but he barely saw them. All he could see was one sentence. The ones that said she could decide things for me. His father had not said power of attorney. He had not said guardianship. He had not used any legal language. Harold had always been that way. He knew how to wire a breaker box, rebuild a porch, fix a furnace in the middle of winter, but legal papers had always made him uneasy. Too many pages, too many phrases that sounded harmless until they were not. Ethan kept replaying the conversation in his mind. Olivia had papers, doctors, signatures, and she kept saying it was temporary. By morning, Ethan had already contacted a Dallas elder law attorney named Marcus Bell, a man recommended by one of Ethan's board members. Marcus did not sound impressed by wealth, which Ethan liked immediately. He sounded direct, careful, the kind of man who listened before speaking. By 9:30, Ethan was sitting in Marcus Bell's office downtown, watching the attorney read the documents in silence. Marcus was in his early 60s with dark skin, silver hair, and reading glasses low on his nose. His office was not flashy. There were no marble floors, no dramatic skyline wall, just shelves of legal books, framed certificates, and a small photograph of Marcus standing with several older adults outside a community legal clinic. It made Ethan trust him more. Marcus finished reading, then set the papers down. This is not enough to prove abuse, he said. Ethan's jaw tightened. But it's enough to be concerned, Marcus added. What do we need? Medical records, the power of attorney document, any evaluations from the time your father signed, admission paperwork from the facility, bank records if we can get them, and most importantly, your father's consent to challenge anything that was done while he was medically vulnerable. He's afraid. That's common. The word common disturbed Ethan more than he expected. Marcus saw it. Elder financial exploitation is rarely loud, he said. It usually starts with someone trusted. Someone who handles the mail, drives to appointments, pays bills, makes calls. Then the older person becomes dependent, and dependency becomes leverage. Ethan looked down. He hated how real that sounded. His father had not been kidnapped. He had not been locked in a basement. He had been managed, quietly, legally enough on paper to make anyone hesitate before calling it wrong. That made it colder. Can we get his hospital file? Ethan asked. If your father authorizes it, yes. If not, we may need a court order later, but start with him. Don't charge in like this is a corporate takeover. He needs to feel like he still has a choice. The sentence stayed with Ethan all the way back to the nursing home. He found Harold in his room by the window, wearing a gray sweater Ethan did not recognize. It hung loose on him. His father was looking out at the parking lot, though there was nothing much to see except a few cars, a bare patch of grass, and a concrete walkway leading to the front entrance. Ethan knocked gently on the open door. Harold did not turn. You're back early, he said. I met with a lawyer. That made Harold close his eyes. Ethan stepped inside but did not sit yet. I'm not doing anything without you, he said. I need you to hear that first. I'm not taking over. I'm not making decisions for you. I'm asking you to help me understand what happened. Harold's shoulders loosened slightly, but only slightly. I don't want to fight, he said. I know, you say that now. I mean it. Harold turned then. His face looked tired in the morning light. Once people start digging, they don't get to choose what comes up. Ethan sat in the chair beside the bed. Dad, you were put in here. Your house was sold. Money I sent for you went somewhere else. If there's a reason all of that happened, I need to know it. And if someone used your illness to control you, then leaving it alone doesn't make us kind. It just leaves you trapped. Harold looked at him for a long time. Then he reached for the water cup beside his bed. His hand trembled. Ethan wanted to help, but he stopped himself. Marcus Bell's words came back. He still has a choice. Harold lifted the cup on his own, took a small sip and set it down. I had a stroke, he said. Ethan already knew the outline, but hearing Harold say it made it heavier. Olivia told me it was minor. It was, compared to what it could have been. Harold rubbed his thumb across the back of his hand. My speech was off for a while. I got confused when I was tired. I hated that part. More than the weakness, more than the walker. I hated knowing what I wanted to say and not being able to get it out fast enough. Ethan stayed quiet. Harold looked toward the window again. Olivia came every day at first. She brought papers, told me they were for insurance, hospital billing, temporary care decisions. She said you were impossible to reach because of time zones and travel. She said she was just trying to keep things moving until I got stronger. Did you ask to call me? Harold's mouth tightened, many times. The room seemed to go colder. What happened? Sometimes she said you were in meetings. Sometimes she said your assistant picked up and said you'd call back. Sometimes she handed me the phone and it went to voicemail. After a while, I stopped asking as much. Ethan felt something hard twist inside him. I never got those messages. Harold nodded slowly. I know that now. The words were quiet, but they carried years of damage. That afternoon, with Harold's consent, Ethan and Marcus requested the hospital records. It took 2 days. 2 days of waiting. 2 days of Ethan sitting beside Harold during meals, learning the rhythm of a life his father should not have been living. The pills at 8. The bland lunch at noon. The staff shift change at 3. The television in the common room always slightly too loud. The way Harold folded his napkin even when the food was bad, because dignity had become one of the few things he could still control. On the third morning, Marcus called. The hospital released the file, he said. You need to come in. Ethan brought Harold with him. It took time. Harold moved slowly with his cane, and Ethan adjusted his pace without saying anything. At the law office, Marcus had arranged a chair near the table and a cup of coffee exactly the way Harold liked it. Black, no sugar. For the first time, Ethan saw his father look slightly less like a patient. Marcus opened the file. There were discharge notes, neurology reports, rehab recommendations, medication lists, a social worker assessment, a temporary care plan. Then Marcus stopped at one page. "This is the capacity evaluation," he said. Ethan leaned forward. Harold looked down at his hands. Marcus read silently, then his face changed. "What?" Ethan asked. Marcus turned the page toward them. The evaluation stated that Harold had mild cognitive disruption immediately after the stroke, but was expected to improve with therapy. It recommended limited assistance for medical and financial coordination for no more than 90 days. 90 days, not 2 years. Ethan looked at Marcus. Marcus tapped another page. "Here's the problem," he said. The power of attorney was executed 8 days after this evaluation. Legally possible, depending on his condition that day, but ethically questionable, especially if the document was presented as temporary and then used to sell property months later. Harold closed his eyes. Ethan could barely breathe. Marcus turned another page. "There's also a note from a hospital nurse." He read it once, then again. This time he did not hand it over immediately. "What does it say?" Ethan asked. Marcus looked at Harold first. "Mr. Mercer, do you remember asking hospital staff to call your son?" Harold opened his eyes. "Yes." Marcus slid the page across the table. Ethan read the note. "Patient requested assistance calling son, Ethan Mercer. Call not completed. Relative Olivia Grant stated son was unavailable and requested all communication go through her due to patient agitation." The words blurred. Patient agitation. His father asking for him had been written down as agitation. Ethan stood abruptly and walked to the window. For a few seconds he said nothing. If he spoke too soon, the anger would come out wrong. He could feel it rising, hot and useless, wanting somewhere to land. Behind him, Harold spoke. "I wasn't agitated." His voice was small. That hurt more than shouting would have. "I just wanted to hear your voice." Ethan turned back. His father was staring at the paper like it had humiliated him all over again. Marcus removed another page from the file. "There's one more thing," he said. Ethan came back to the table. Marcus pointed to a scanned envelope logged into the hospital's patient belongings record. It was marked as personal correspondence, not mailed recipient, Ethan Mercer, sender, Harold Mercer. Ethan stared at it. "Where is it?" Marcus looked at the next line. "Released to family representative." Ethan already knew the answer before Marcus said it. Olivia Grant signed for it. Ethan did not move for a long moment. The hospital file lay open on Marcus Bell's conference table, and the scanned line showing Olivia's signature seemed to grow darker the longer he looked at it. Released to family representative. 2 words that sounded harmless. 2 words that had kept a father's voice from reaching his son. Harold stared at the page as if he were looking at something he had buried with his own hands. "I remember that envelope," he said quietly. Ethan turned toward him. Harold did not look up. His fingers rested on the edge of the table, bent slightly from age and years of work. There was a small scar across one knuckle Ethan recognized. His father had gotten it repairing the kitchen cabinet years ago. Ethan had forgotten the cabinet, but not the hand. Not that hand. "What was in it?" Ethan asked. Harold swallowed. "A letter." Marcus sat back slowly. He did not interrupt. He had the practiced stillness of a man who knew when the law had stepped aside and grief had entered the room. Ethan's voice dropped. "A letter to me?" Harold nodded once. "I wrote it after the stroke. The 2nd week, maybe the 3rd. Time was strange then, everything came in pieces. Nurses changing shifts, trays coming in, Olivia talking over doctors, people asking me if I understood things I wasn't sure I understood." His face tightened with shame. "I hated that. I hated being treated like I was already half gone." Ethan looked down at the table. "You weren't." Harold gave a faint, tired smile. "Some days I wasn't sure." The room settled into a heavy silence. Outside the glass wall of Marcus's office, a receptionist answered a phone in a soft voice. Somewhere down the hall, a printer started and stopped. Ordinary sounds, life continuing politely while something inside Ethan came apart. "What did the letter say?" he asked. Harold breathed in slowly. "It said I was sorry." Ethan frowned. "Sorry for what?" Harold looked at him then, and the look on his face was worse than any accusation could have been. "For becoming something you had to manage." Ethan felt the words strike him so hard he almost leaned back. "No." Harold's mouth moved slightly, but he did not speak right away. "I thought maybe that was what had happened," he said. I thought maybe I had become too much. Calls, doctor bills, the house, the repairs, the stroke. Olivia kept saying you were under pressure, that your company was in a delicate phase. That you cared, of course, but you needed things handled quietly. Ethan's hands closed on the edge of the table. She told you that? Harold nodded. And I believed enough of it to be ashamed. That's the part I don't like admitting. Ethan looked away toward the window. Dallas spread beyond the office glass, bright and busy and completely unaware. He had stood in cities all over the world and felt in control. In this room, with one old hospital note and one missing letter, he felt like a man who had built a tower on rotten ground. I sent money because I thought it helped, he said. I know. No, Ethan said, turning back. You don't. I sent it and I let it stand in for everything else. Calls I should made, visits I should taken, questions I should ask myself instead of letting Olivia answer for you. Harold looked down. Ethan, I should have come home. The sentence left him before he could make it cleaner, before he could cover it with reasons. There had been so many reasons: flights, investors, deadlines, expansion, the constant emergency of success. But in that moment, every reason sounded small beside the image of Harold in a hospital bed, writing a letter because he could not reach his own son. Harold's face tightened. You were building a life. You were part of that life. I didn't want to pull you backward. Ethan almost laughed, but there was no humor in him. You raised me so I could move forward. I used that as permission to leave you behind. Harold closed his eyes. Marcus stood quietly. I'll step out for a few minutes. Neither man answered. The door opened and closed gently behind him. For a while they sat alone. The hospital file remained between them. Finally Harold reached toward the folder. His hand hovered over the scanned image of the missing envelope. I kept waiting for you to answer, he said. That was the foolish part. I thought maybe Olivia had mailed it. Maybe you read it and didn't know what to say. Maybe it made you feel guilty, and you stayed away because guilt is heavy. Ethan could not speak. Harold continued, slower now. Then months passed. The rehab ended. Olivia moved me from temporary care to here. She said the house was too dangerous. She said you agreed. She said you didn't want me alone there. I never said that, I know. Harold's voice almost broke. I know that now. He pressed his palm flat against the table. But back then I sat in that room and tried to make peace with it. I told myself maybe this was how families changed. Not with shouting, not with one big betrayal. Just with distance, one missed call, one unanswered message, one holiday where nobody comes because everybody is busy. Ethan lowered his head. That was the part that cut deepest. Because Olivia had lied, but distance had made the lie believable. If Ethan had been close, the lie would have had nowhere to grow. Harold looked at him, and his voice softened. I was angry at you for a while. Ethan nodded once. You had the right. I was angry, Harold said again, and then I got tired. Being angry alone takes too much strength. So after a while, I stopped waiting the same way. I still looked at the door, but I stopped telling myself you might be on the other side of it. Ethan covered his mouth with one hand. For a second, he was not a billionaire, not a founder, not a man whose name appeared in business articles and investor briefings. He was only a son sitting across from the father who had once waited for him until waiting became too painful. I'm here now, Ethan said. Harold's eyes filled. I know. No, I mean it. I'm here now, and I'm not leaving you in this alone. Harold looked frightened again, but this time the fear was mixed with something else. Hope, maybe. Or the danger of hope. You say that because you're upset. I say it because I should have said it years ago. Harold looked at him for a long time. Then he nodded very slightly. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the first opening of a locked door. When Marcus returned, he had another document in his hand. I made a call to the hospital records department, he said. The original envelope is gone, but there may be a copy of the intake scan. Sometimes correspondence is scanned before release if it's logged through patient services. Ethan straightened. Can we get it? I requested it. They said they'll check the archive. Harold's face went pale. Ethan noticed. You don't have to read it, he said. Harold shook his head. That letter was written by a scared man. That man deserved to be heard. The words settled heavily between them. Marcus looked from Harold to Ethan, then back down at the file. There's something else you both should know, he said. If Olivia intercepted that letter while acting as your representative, and if she was also controlling communication, that helps establish a pattern. not proof by itself, but a pattern. Ethan nodded. Pattern, that was what this was becoming. Not one bad decision, not confusion, not a misunderstanding. A pattern of isolation, a pattern of control, a pattern that had stolen years from both of them. Later that afternoon, Ethan brought Harold back to the nursing home. They moved slowly through the lobby together. At the front desk, Marlene looked up and offered Harold a small smile. He returned it, faintly. That small gesture stayed with Ethan. It was the first time he had seen his father look like someone still connected to the world around him. In Harold's room, Ethan helped set the folder on the dresser. He did not unpack it, he did not push, the file could wait. For once, he understood that not everything painful needed to be handled immediately, just because he had the power to handle it. Harold sat on the bed and looked at the floor. "I need to tell you something," he said. Ethan stood near the door. "What is it?" Harold's hands folded together, his eyes stayed down. "There's another reason I didn't fight Olivia harder." Ethan felt the air shift. After everything they had learned, he thought there could not be much left that would surprise him. But Harold's voice had changed. This was not fear of paperwork. This was something older, something buried deeper. Ethan stepped back into the room. "What reason?" Harold finally looked up. His eyes were wet and full of a pain Ethan did not recognize. "Because I owed her father more than I ever told you." Ethan stood in the doorway of Harold's room, unable to speak. The sentence stayed in the air between them. "Because I owed her father more than I ever told you." Harold looked suddenly older after saying it. Not physically, exactly. It was something in the way his face seemed to fold inward, as if a part of him had been holding that truth upright for years and had finally lost the strength. Ethan walked back to the chair and sat down slowly. "Olivia's father," he said. "Uncle Raymond." Harold nodded. Ethan remembered Raymond Grant only in fragments and only through the version adults told after someone was gone. A charming man, a hard worker when he wanted to be, a man who loved big promises and left smaller people cleaning up after them. He had died years ago, and after that, Olivia had drifted closer to Harold and Ethan's side of the family. Not warmly exactly, but steadily, present at holidays, present after Ethan's mother passed, present when Harold needed help. Ethan had never thought deeply about why. Now he wondered if he had missed another entire story happening right beside him. "What did you owe him?" Ethan asked. Harold rubbed both hands over his knees. The movement was slow, uneasy. "Raymond was my younger brother," he said. "But there were years when he felt more like a storm I kept letting into the house. He was smart. Too smart in the wrong directions. He could sell anybody anything. He could make a bad idea sound like hope." Ethan stayed quiet. Harold looked toward the window. The late afternoon light had thinned, leaving the room softer and sadder than before. "After your mother died, he came around more. Not for me, not really. He came because he needed money. He always needed money. Business trouble, tax trouble, a woman threatening to sue, a partner demanding repayment. It was always something." Ethan's mouth tightened. "You helped him, more times than I should have. Why?" Harold looked at him then. "Because he was my brother." The answer was simple. Too simple, and somehow completely human. Harold continued. "The last time was different. He came to me ashamed, really ashamed. That was rare for him. He said Olivia was drowning in debt because she had signed for one of his business loans. She was already grown by then, working, trying to build a professional life. Raymond had used her good credit, promised he would handle the payments, then he disappeared from the problem like he always did." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Did Olivia know you helped?" "She knew some of it, not all." "What does that mean?" "It means I paid enough to keep her from being ruined, quietly. I didn't want her hating him more than she already did. I thought I was preserving what little family they had left." Harold's eyes lowered. "I was wrong about that." Ethan thought about Olivia's voice on the phone. Controlled, bitter. The way she had said from boardrooms, from wherever your next important meeting happened to be. That had not come from nowhere. It had come from a place that had been collecting resentment for years. "Did she resent you?" Ethan asked. Harold gave a tired smile. "She thanked me at first. Then she started acting like I had only done what I should have done. Then, after a while, like I had not done enough." The room was quiet except for the faint buzz of the wall light. Harold reached toward the nightstand and opened the top drawer. Inside were tissues, an old pair of reading glasses, and a small brown envelope. He took it out with care, as if it might fall apart in his hands. I kept this because I suppose some part of me always knew it mattered. He handed it to Ethan. Inside were copies of old checks, loan payoff confirmations, and a letter from a bank dated years earlier. Ethan scanned the pages, his eyes moving quickly at first, then slower as the pattern became clear. Harold had paid thousands, then more again. Not business investments, not gifts. Rescue payments. Payments made on Olivia's behalf. You never told me, Ethan said. You had just started doing well then, really well. Your mother was gone. You were working like the world would end if you stopped for one day. Harold looked at him with a tenderness that hurt. I didn't want you carrying Raymond too. Ethan looked at the documents in his hand. And Olivia? Harold's face changed. Olivia thought I judged her. Did you? No, but maybe I did something worse. I pitied her. That landed heavily. Harold looked down, ashamed in a quieter way now. She could feel it, I know she could. She had pride, a lot of pride. And every time I helped, I think part of her hated needing it. Then when you became successful, when your name started showing up in articles and people talked about you like you had escaped all of us, she changed. Ethan remembered family dinners where Olivia made small comments with a smile. Must be nice to have money that solves everything. Must be nice to live where problems can't find you. At the time he had taken them as jokes. Sharp ones maybe, but jokes. Now they sounded different. She thought I favored you, Harold said. She said it once. Not directly. Not like an accusation. She said I had spent my life saving one side of the family and applauding the other. Ethan looked up. What did you say? I told her that wasn't fair. And, Harold's voice softened, she said fairness was a luxury people with money talked about after they had already won. For the first time, Ethan could see Olivia not as a flat villain, not as a monster hiding behind paperwork, but as a woman who had lived too long with humiliation and decided humiliation owed her interest. It did not excuse what she had done. If anything, it made it more tragic, because pain had not made her kinder, it had made her careful, cold, patient. Harold took the papers back and slid them into the envelope. When I had the stroke and she started helping, I felt guilty refusing her. She was Raymond's daughter. She had no one else close enough, and I thought, maybe this is her chance to feel trusted. Maybe this is how we heal what Raymond broke. His mouth trembled slightly. I handed her the keys because I thought trust could fix what shame had ruined. Ethan leaned forward. Dad, she used that trust, I know. Then why still protect her? Harold looked at him. Because when you love family long enough, sometimes you keep reaching for who they could have been instead of facing who they have become. Ethan had no answer for that. The words were too true and too sad. A knock came at the door. Both men turned. Marlene stood there, one hand resting lightly on the frame. Her face was careful. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said. Mr. Mercer, there's someone at the front desk asking about your visitor records. Ethan stood. Who? Marlene looked at Harold first. That told Ethan everything. Miss Grant, she said. Harold's face drained. Ethan felt his shoulders tighten, but his voice stayed calm. She's here? No, Marlene said. She called. She said no information about Mr. Mercer was to be released to anyone without her approval. She also asked whether you had been taken off site today. Ethan looked at his father. Harold was staring down at his hands again. That frightened posture had returned. Did she have that authority? Ethan asked. Marlene hesitated. She is listed as the primary responsible party in our system. But if Mr. Mercer wants that changed, we can start the process. Harold said nothing. Ethan waited. He wanted to speak for him. Every instinct in him wanted to step in, take charge, fix the form, fix the file, fix the room, fix the years, but he did not. Harold had been spoken over enough. After a long moment, Harold lifted his head. His voice was weak, but it was clear. I want Ethan listed first. Marlene nodded, and for the first time since Ethan had found his father, something in the room shifted toward him. Not rescue, not victory. Just one small piece of control returning to the person it had been taken from. I'll bring the form, she said. When she left, Harold leaned back against the pillow and closed his eyes. Ethan sat beside him. Neither spoke for a while. Then Harold opened his eyes again. There's one more property, he said. Ethan turned. What property? The lake lot. Your mother's brother sold it to us years ago. She loved that place. Olivia knows I never wanted to sell it. Ethan felt the next wave coming before Harold finished. I think she's been waiting for me to stop fighting over it. His phone buzzed. Ethan looked down. An email from Marcus Bell. Subject line, urgent, attempted title activity. Ethan opened it. The message was short. A title company had just requested verification for the sale of a lake property still registered in Harold Mercer's name. The buyer's representative was listed as Olivia Grant. Ethan called Marcus before he even left Harold's room. The email was still open on his phone, the words too clean for what they meant. Attempted title activity, buyer's representative, Olivia Grant. The lake lot that Harold had tried to protect, the last piece of land still tied to Ethan's mother, was already being moved like a number on a spreadsheet. Marcus answered on the second ring. I saw your email, Ethan said. Tell me there's a to stop this. There is, Marcus replied. But we need to move today. Ethan looked at Harold. His father sat on the edge of the bed, both hands folded around the top of his cane, staring at the wall as if he could already see another place being taken from him. She's trying to sell the lake lot, Ethan said. I know, I spoke to the title company. They haven't closed. They're waiting on final identity verification and proof of authority. I've already sent notice that the power of attorney is disputed. Is that enough? For now it slows things down. It doesn't end it. Ethan closed his eyes for a second. What do you need from us? Your father needs to sign a revocation of power of attorney, if he chooses to. Then we file for emergency injunctive relief to stop any transfer of property. We also need to notify Adult Protective Services and the bank's fraud department. Harold looked up at those words. Ethan lowered the phone slightly. Dad, he said, Marcus says you can revoke the power of attorney today, but it has to be your choice. Harold's fingers tightened around the cane. For a moment the old fear returned. It moved across his face like a shadow. Ethan could almost hear the old thoughts passing through him. Olivia would be angry. The family would split. The truth would make noise. People would ask questions. Papers would arrive. Lawyers would speak. The quiet would be gone. Then Harold looked toward the window. I spent my whole life fixing things before they hurt the people I loved, he said softly. And somehow I let this keep hurting everybody. Ethan waited. Harold turned back. I want to sign it. By mid-afternoon, Harold was sitting in Marcus Bell's office with a pen in his hand. The document was not long, not compared to the hospital file, not compared to the deed records or the nursing home contract. It was only a few pages, but it carried more weight than all of them. Revocation of durable power of attorney. Marcus read every line aloud, slowly, clearly. He asked Harold twice if he understood, not in a condescending way, not like the hospital had done. He asked the way a good lawyer asked when a person's dignity mattered more than speed. Harold answered each time, yes, I understand. When he signed, his hand shook. But he signed his own name, Harold Mercer. Not perfect, not as strong as it had once been, but his. Ethan watched the pen move across the paper and felt something in his chest tighten and loosen at the same time. It should not have felt like a victory for a man to sign his own name, but after everything that had happened, it did. Marcus notarized the document, made copies, and began sending notices immediately. To the title company, he said, to the bank, to the facility, to Olivia's office, and to the county clerk. Ethan stood near the window while Marcus worked. Harold sat quietly, exhausted but different. His shoulders were still curved, his face was still tired, but something had changed in his eyes. Not confidence, not yet, more like the first breath after being underwater too long. Then Ethan's phone rang. Olivia. He looked at the screen. Marcus glanced up. You don't have to answer. Harold looked at him too. Ethan answered. He put the call on speaker and placed the phone on Marcus's desk. Ethan, Olivia said. Her voice was sharp beneath the calm. What exactly do you think you're doing? Marcus leaned back, listening. Ethan did not raise his voice. I'm helping my father review his legal affairs. Your father? Olivia gave a short laugh. That's interesting. You disappear for years and suddenly he's your father again? Harold flinched. Ethan saw it. So did Marcus. I'm not going to argue with you, Ethan said. No, of course not. You don't argue. You hire people. You write checks. You let strangers clean up the mess after you realize family life isn't something you can manage from a private jet. The words were designed to hurt, and they did. But Ethan did not take the bait. The power of attorney has been revoked, he said. The title company has been notified. Any attempt to sell the lake property is being challenged. For the first time, Olivia went silent. When she spoke again, the warmth was gone. He doesn't understand what he's doing. Harold's face changed. Ethan looked at him. Harold leaned toward the phone, his voice quiet but clear. I understand. Another silence. Then Olivia said softer, Uncle Harold, you don't. Ethan is angry. He's embarrassed. He's looking for someone to blame because he knows he wasn't here. Harold closed his eyes. Ethan's hand tightened into a fist. Olivia continued. I was here. I handled the hospital, the bills, the calls, the facility, the house when it became unsafe. I did the hard things while he sent money and felt noble about it. Harold opened his eyes. You handled too much, he said. His voice was not loud. That made it stronger. You asked me to trust you, Harold continued, and I did. But you didn't just help me, Olivia. You took over, I protected you, you isolated me. The words landed in the room like a plate breaking. Olivia breathed in sharply. That is cruel, she said. No, Harold said. It is late, but it is true. For several seconds no one spoke. Then Olivia's voice hardened. You are making a mistake, all of you. The call ended. Harold sat back slowly. His face had gone pale. Ethan reached toward him, then stopped just short of touching his shoulder. Dad? Harold nodded once, but his breathing was uneven. Marcus pushed a glass of water across the desk. That was important, Marcus said gently. But now you both need to understand something. Her next move may be to claim your father is being pressured by you. Ethan looked at him. Can she do that? She can try. She may argue undue influence. She may say you arrived, overwhelmed him, and pushed him into revoking documents he previously signed. That's why we document everything properly. Medical capacity letter, independent witnesses, facility notes, bank records. Every step clean. Harold gave a tired sound. She might, Marcus said. Harold looked down. That was the wound. Olivia knew exactly how to press. Not money, not property, the fear of being seen as incapable. Ethan sat beside him. Then we prove you're not. Over the next week, the fight widened. Marcus moved quickly. He filed emergency papers to freeze the lake property sale. He contacted the bank where Ethan's transfers had been routed. He sent formal requests to the nursing home for visitor logs, payment histories, and communication notes. He referred the matter to Adult Protective Services, not as a dramatic accusation, but as a documented concern. Olivia responded the way Marcus had predicted. First, she denied everything, then she blamed Harold's memory, then she blamed Ethan's absence. She sent a letter through her own attorney claiming Harold had willingly delegated responsibilities because Ethan had been unavailable. She argued that the house had been sold for his benefit. She claimed every dollar had gone toward care, taxes, repairs, and debts, but the documents began telling a different story. A bank investigator found transfers from Harold's management account to a consulting firm registered under Olivia's business address. The amounts were not massive enough to seem outrageous at first glance. That was what made them effective. Monthly fees, administrative services, family care coordination, words that sounded almost respectable if no one looked too closely. Then Marcus found the second layer. Payments to a storage company Harold had never used, a vendor invoice for home repairs after the house had already been sold, a nursing home supply fee that the facility said it had never charged. The pattern was not wild, it was careful. That made Ethan colder than if it had been greedy and obvious. Olivia had not panicked, she had planned. One afternoon, Marcus brought in a bank employee named Dana Reynolds. She was in her 40s, professional, tense, and clearly uncomfortable being involved in a family matter. But she had records, and records had a way of speaking when people were afraid to. Dana explained that Harold had visited the bank months after entering the nursing home. Olivia had brought him. Harold had asked whether he could remove Olivia from his accounts. Ethan looked at Harold, his father's face tightened with recognition. Dana's voice was careful. Mr. Mercer seemed hesitant, but clear. He asked if a power of attorney could be cancelled. I advised him to speak with an attorney. Ms. Grant interrupted several times and said he was confused about the purpose of the account structure. What happened after that? Marcus asked. Dana glanced at Harold. He became quiet. Ms. Grant said they would come back another time. They left. Harold's hands trembled on his cane. I remember that, he said. His voice sounded far away. I thought maybe I had misunderstood. She told me in the car that I had embarrassed both of us. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Dana looked down at the table. I should have filed an internal concern then, she said. I didn't have enough. That's what I told myself. Harold looked at her. You're here now. The woman's eyes filled, but she held herself steady. "Yes," she said, "I am." That evening, Ethan returned Harold to the nursing home. They were both quiet on the drive. The sky over Dallas had turned violet, and traffic moved around them in tired streams of headlights. When they reached the facility, Harold did not get out right away. "I keep thinking," he said, "about how many times I almost spoke louder." Ethan turned off the engine. "You were outnumbered." "No," Harold said softly. "I was ashamed. That's different." Ethan looked at him. Harold stared through the windshield. When a man gets old, people start talking around him, over him, about him. At first you correct them, then you get tired. Then one day you realize silence is easier than fighting to be treated like you are still in the room. Ethan felt the words settle into him. He had no answer that would not sound too small, so he stayed quiet. Inside, Marlene met them at the entrance with a strange look on her face. "Mr. Mercer," she said to Ethan, "there was a delivery for your father." Harold frowned. "A delivery?" She handed Ethan a padded envelope. No return name, just Harold Mercer written in black ink. Ethan felt uneasy before he opened it. Inside was a copy of a shredded document taped back together badly. Someone had tried to destroy it, then someone else had saved what remained. At the top, only a few words were still readable. "Lake Property Sale Authorization." At the bottom was Harold's signature. But this time Ethan knew immediately it was not his father's hand. Ethan knew the signature was wrong before anyone else said it. He had seen his father sign enough things over the years: birthday cards, tax forms, checks for repairs, the old mortgage paperwork. Harold's handwriting had changed with age, yes, and the stroke had taken some steadiness from his hand. But even now, even weakened, Harold's signature had a certain shape, a hard beginning. A slight lift on the M, a clean downward stroke at the end. This one had none of that. It was shaky in the wrong way, not weak, imitated. Harold looked at the taped-together paper in Ethan's hand and went very still. "I didn't sign that," he said. His voice was quiet, but there was no uncertainty in it. Marlene stood beside them in the nursing home lobby, her face pale. The front desk phone rang behind her, but no one answered it for several seconds. The sound filled the silence like a warning. Ethan looked down at the envelope again. "Who brought this?" "I don't know," Marlene said. "It was left at the front desk during shift change. No one saw who dropped it off." Ethan turned the paper over carefully. On the back, someone had written 3 words in blue ink. "Check the notary." He read it once. Then again. Marlene saw his face. "What is it?" Ethan folded the page and slid it back into the envelope. "A door opening," he said. By the next morning, Marcus Bell had the document under a scanner, comparing it against Harold's verified signatures from the revocation form, the old deed records, and his driver's license renewal. Marcus was not a handwriting expert, and he said so plainly, but even he could see enough to know this had moved beyond questionable paperwork. "This is a serious escalation," Marcus said. Harold sat at the conference table with both hands wrapped around a coffee cup. He had insisted on coming. Ethan had offered to go alone, but Harold had looked at him with a quiet firmness and said, "It has my name on it. I should be in the room," so there he was. In the room, not spoken over, not managed, not hidden. Marcus tapped the notary block at the bottom of the sale authorization. "The notary is listed as Carla Reyes." Ethan frowned. "Do we know her?" "Not yet, but her commission number is here. I'll verify it." Marcus made 2 calls. The first was to the Texas Secretary of State's notary database. The second was to a mobile notary service in Plano. The room stayed still while he spoke in his measured legal voice, asking for records, dates, appointment logs, and identity verification. When he hung up, his face had changed. "What?" Ethan asked. "Carla Reyes exists," Marcus said, "but according to the service, she did not notarize anything for Harold Mercer last week. She reported her stamp missing 6 months ago." Harold closed his eyes. Ethan slowly stood. "That's forgery." Marcus looked at him. "It appears to be. We need law enforcement involved now." The word law enforcement hit Harold harder than Ethan expected. His father's hands tightened around the cup. A little coffee trembled over the rim and spotted the table. Ethan reached for a napkin and wiped it gently without saying anything. Harold watched him do it. "This will become public," Harold said. "Maybe people will know." Ethan looked at him. "People should know what happened to you." Harold shook his head. "You think that will feel like justice? Maybe it will, but it will also feel like being undressed in front of strangers. My bank accounts, my illness, my confusion, my signature, my family, all of it spread out for other people to judge. Ethan sat back down. He understood then that justice had a cost for the person being protected. People talked about exposing the truth like it was clean. But for someone like Harold, who had spent his life standing straight, paying bills on time, keeping pain inside the house, the truth felt almost humiliating. "I'm sorry," Ethan said. Harold looked at him. "I should have said that earlier," Ethan continued. "Not because we're stopping, we have to stop her, but because this is your life being pulled apart, not mine." Harold looked down at the table. For a long time he said nothing. Then he nodded. "That's all I needed you to understand." The investigation moved quickly after that. Not dramatically, not like in movies. No flashing lights at Olivia's office that day. No shouting in a hallway. It started with forms, sworn statements, phone calls, and certified records. Marcus referred the forged document to the county fraud unit. Adult Protective Services opened a formal case. The bank froze accounts connected to Harold's care funds. The title company halted the lake property sale entirely. Olivia's attorney responded within hours. The letter accused Ethan of manipulating an elderly man after years of neglect. It claimed Harold had become emotionally dependent on Ethan following his sudden return. It described Olivia as the only consistent caregiver over a prolonged period of family absence. When Marcus read that line aloud, Ethan felt heat rise up his neck. Harold surprised him by laughing once. Not happily, just sharply. "Well," Harold said, "at least she finally admitted I had been left with only her." Marcus looked at him with something like respect. That line may hurt her more than help her. 2 days later they went to court. It was not a full trial, not yet. It was an emergency hearing in a county courtroom with wooden benches, fluorescent lights, and a judge who looked like she had heard every kind of family excuse people could make. Harold wore a clean navy sweater Ethan had bought for him, though Harold had insisted on paying for part of it himself with cash from his own wallet. "I still buy my own clothes," he had said. Ethan did not argue. Olivia sat on the other side of the courtroom beside her attorney. She looked elegant, composed, and almost wounded. Her dark blazer was perfectly pressed. Her hair was pinned neatly back. Anyone who did not know the documents might have looked at her and seen a responsible woman unfairly dragged into a family fight. Then she saw Harold. For half a second, something flickered across her face. Not guilt, not exactly, more like irritation that he had shown up as himself. The judge listened to Marcus first. He did not exaggerate. He did not perform outrage. He laid out the timeline: Harold's stroke, the temporary care recommendation, the disputed power of attorney, the house sale, the communication restrictions, the intercepted letter, the attempted sale of the lake property, the questionable signature, the notary stamp reported missing months earlier. Each fact landed quietly. That made it worse. Olivia's attorney argued that Ethan had abandoned local responsibilities and was now trying to rewrite history out of guilt. He said Olivia had made difficult decisions under pressure. He said Harold's memory was inconsistent. He said family conflict did not equal exploitation. Then the judge looked at Harold. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "do you wish to speak?" Ethan's heart tightened. Harold's hand was steady on his cane, but Ethan saw the small movement in his jaw. Fear was still there. Shame was still there. Years of being questioned had not vanished in 1 week. But Harold stood, slowly. Marcus moved as if to help, then stopped when Harold gave him a tiny shake of the head. Harold faced the judge. "I am not confused about my home," he said. The courtroom went silent. "I am not confused about my land. I am not confused about wanting to call my son. I was weak after my stroke. I was tired. Some days I was afraid. But afraid is not the same as incapable." Olivia looked down. Harold continued, his voice rough but clear. "I trusted my niece because I thought family would protect what I could not protect for a while. Instead, I became smaller every time I asked a question. I was told I misunderstood. I was told I had already agreed. I was told I would embarrass myself if I pushed. After a while I stopped pushing." He paused. Ethan could barely breathe. Harold looked once toward Olivia. Not with hatred. That somehow made it more devastating. "I do not want revenge," he said. "I want my name back on my own life." The judge's expression changed, not soft, but human. By the end of the hearing, the court granted a temporary order freezing any transfer of Harold's property, suspending Olivia's authority pending further review, and requiring a full accounting of every transaction made under the power of attorney. Olivia did not look at Ethan when the order was read. She looked at Harold, and for the first time, Harold did not look away. Outside the courtroom, Olivia approached them before her attorney could stop her. "You really think this ends here?" she said, her voice low. Ethan stepped forward, but Harold lifted one hand. "Not much, just enough." "No," Harold said. "I think this is where it finally starts ending." Olivia's mouth tightened. For a second all the polish vanished, and Ethan saw the resentment underneath. The old wound, the old hunger, the belief that someone else's dignity had always cost her something. Then her attorney touched her arm and she turned away. 3 weeks later, the formal findings began to come in. The bank confirmed improper transfers. The title company confirmed fraudulent documentation in the attempted lake sale. The mobile notary service confirmed the stamp had been used without authorization. Adult Protective Services substantiated financial exploitation. The district attorney's office opened a criminal inquiry. Olivia was charged on a Tuesday morning, not with every wrong she had committed in spirit. The law could not hold all of that, but it could hold enough. Forgery, financial exploitation of an elderly adult, fraudulent transfer attempts. Marcus called Ethan with the news while Ethan was at the nursing home or helping Harold pack. Not everything, just the first box. A sweater, a shaving kit, a worn paperback, the small brown envelope of old family documents, the copied file that had started as pain and become proof. Ethan ended the call and looked at his father. "It's done," he said softly. They charged her. Harold sat on the edge of the bed. He did not smile, he did not cheer. He only breathed out like he had been carrying a stone in his chest and had finally set it down. "Good," he said. Then after a moment, quieter. "What a terrible word that is for something so sad." Ethan sat beside him. Neither of them said anything for a while. That afternoon, Harold left the nursing home. There were no cameras, no grand speech, no limousine waiting outside. Ethan pulled his own car to the front entrance, and Marlene walked Harold down the hall with his discharge folder under one arm. At the doorway, she hugged him carefully. "You take care of yourself, Mr. Mercer." Harold patted her hand. "You did more than your job." Marlene's eyes filled. "So did you," she said. "You stood up?" Harold looked at the open doors. Then he looked at Ethan. For a moment, he seemed afraid to cross the threshold, as if leaving a place of captivity was still frightening because freedom required believing it was real. Ethan stood beside him, not ahead, beside. Harold took one step, then another. The sunlight hit his face when they reached the sidewalk. He closed his eyes. And for the first time since Ethan had come home, Harold Mercer looked like a man who had been returned to himself. That evening, in the quiet of the short-term apartment Ethan had rented near the lake, Harold handed his son an old metal box. It was dented at the corners with a strip of faded tape across the lid. "I kept this hidden for years," Harold said. Ethan took it carefully. "What is it?" Harold looked toward the window, where the last light of day was settling over the water. "Everything I couldn't say while I was trying not to need anyone." Ethan opened the metal box at the small kitchen table after Harold had gone to bed. The apartment was quiet, not empty the way the hotel room had been. Quiet in a lived-in way. Harold's cane leaned near the door. His sweater hung over the back of a chair. A mug sat beside the sink because he had insisted on washing it himself in the morning. Inside the box were letters, photographs, notebooks, receipts and folded papers kept in careful stacks. Nothing looked valuable at first. No hidden will, no secret account, no final dramatic document that would change the legal case. But as Ethan began to read, he realized the box held something heavier. It held the version of Harold Mercer that Ethan had never stopped long enough to see. There were notes Harold had written after Ethan moved overseas. Not letters he had sent. Just thoughts written down and tucked away. Some were only a few lines, some filled entire pages. Ethan's first year away. Said he sounded tired on the phone, told him I was proud. Did not tell him the furnace broke again. He had enough on his mind, another page. The house felt too large tonight. Made coffee out of habit. Poured 2 cups before I remembered she was gone. Sat with both cups until one went cold. Ethan stopped reading. He pressed his hand over his mouth and looked toward the bedroom door. All those years he had thought of his father as strong because Harold never asked for much. He had mistaken silence for comfort. He had mistaken endurance for peace. There were old photographs, too. Not the kind arranged for albums, small, ordinary photographs. Harold standing beside the lake lot with Ethan's mother years ago, both of them grown, sun in their eyes, hands muddy from clearing brush. Harold on the porch of the old house holding a paintbrush. Harold sitting at the kitchen table with bills spread out, one hand on his forehead, a tired smile caught by whoever had taken the picture. No grand moments, just life, the kind of life that disappeared slowly when nobody was looking closely enough. At the bottom of the box was a small black journal. The cover was worn soft at the edges. Ethan opened it carefully. The last entries were from the nursing home. Day 28. Olivia says this is temporary. I am trying to believe her. Day 63 asked again if Ethan called. She said he was in meetings. I hope that means he is doing well. Day 110. Stopped asking today. It made her angry. I do not want trouble. Ethan had to stand. He walked to the sink, braced both hands on the counter, and breathed through a pain that did not move like ordinary sadness. It moved like recognition, like the moment a man finally understood that his success had not protected the person who made it possible. It had only carried him farther away. The next morning, Harold found him still awake. Ethan was sitting at the table with the box open and the journal closed in front of him. His eyes were red. His shirt was wrinkled. He looked less like the man who had landed on a private jet, and more like someone who had spent the night losing an argument with his own memory. Harold stood in the hallway for a moment. Then he said, "You read it?" Ethan nodded. "I'm sorry." Harold walked slowly to the chair across from him and sat down. "For reading it? For not being there to live any of it with you?" Harold looked down at the box. "I didn't keep those things to punish you, I know. I kept them because sometimes paper remembered better than people. That broke Ethan more than blame would have." He reached across the table, not dramatically, not like a promise meant to fix everything at once. Just one hand across an old table in a rented apartment near the lake. Harold looked at it. Then he placed his hand over Ethan's. For a while, neither of them spoke. The months that followed did not turn into a perfect life. Olivia's case moved slowly, the way real cases often did. Her assets were reviewed, some money was recovered, some was gone. The court restored Harold's full control over his remaining property. The lake lot stayed in his name. The old house could not be brought back, but the truth around its sale was documented, challenged, and no longer hidden. Olivia did not apologize, not in any way that mattered. Through her attorney, she called the matter a misunderstanding, a family conflict, a burden she had carried alone. But the legal consequences came anyway. Charges remained. Professional licenses were questioned. The polished life she had built around being trusted began to crack in public. Harold did not celebrate that. He only said once, while looking out over the lake, "I hope she becomes honest before she becomes lonely." Ethan remembered that line for a long time. Harold moved into a small house 10 minutes from Ethan's Dallas office. Not Ethan's mansion, not a luxury wing built to impress anyone. A real house, one floor, wide doorways. A porch facing west, a kitchen Harold could move through without help, a little workshop in the back where he sorted old tools, even if his hands could not use them the way they once had. Ethan offered more. Harold refused most of it. "I need comfort," Harold said, "not ownership by another name." So Ethan learned. Slowly, he learned not to solve every discomfort with money. He learned to ask before arranging. He learned to sit in silence without checking his phone. He learned that presence had a shape, a weight, a sound. It sounded like coffee poured in the morning, like 2 chairs creaking on a porch, like a phone call made for no reason except to say, "I was thinking about you." On Thursday evenings, Ethan came over after work. At first he brought dinner in expensive containers, food Harold politely ate and never asked for again. Then one evening Harold handed him a grocery list and said, "If you want to eat with me, we can cook like regular people." So they did, badly at first. Then better. They burned chicken once and laughed harder than either of them expected. Harold showed Ethan how to fix a loose cabinet hinge with one good hand and more patience than Ethan had brought into any boardroom. Ethan set up Harold's medication organizer, but only after Harold told him where it belonged. That was the difference now. Ethan helped. He did not take over. One late afternoon, months after the court order, they sat together on Harold's porch. The sun was low, the air was warm. The street was quiet in that soft American way, with distant lawn mowers and cars passing slowly under trees. Harold held a cup of coffee in both hands. Ethan sat beside him, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, phone turned face down on the small table between them. After a while, Harold said, "You know what I needed most?" Ethan looked at him. Harold smiled faintly. "Not all the money." Ethan nodded. "I know, I was grateful for it," Harold said. "Don't misunderstand me, but money is a strange thing. It can pay the bill and still leave the room empty." Ethan looked out at the street. "I'm trying to be in the room now." Harold's hand reached over and rested briefly on his arm. "I know. That was enough. Not forgiveness wrapped in a speech, not a perfect ending. Just 2 words given quietly, from a father who had nearly disappeared from his son's life while still alive." The sun moved lower. For once, Ethan did not think about flights, meetings, investors, or deadlines. He only listened to his father breathing beside him. He listened to the porch boards shift under their feet. He listened to the silence that no longer felt like abandonment. It felt like time returned. Some fathers never ask for much. They make themselves small so their children can grow. And sometimes the most dangerous mistake is thinking they will always be there, waiting quietly. If this story made you think of someone you love, leave a few words for them in the comments before too much time passes.